Maria Rodriguez adjusted her new uniform for the third time that morning, smoothing down the navy blue scrubs that still felt foreign against her skin. The certification card in her pocket was barely 2 weeks old, the ink on her certified nursing assistant license still fresh. At 26, she was finally ready to start the career she'd dreamed about since her teenage years, when she'd watched her own grandmother battle illness with such grace and dignity. The Golden Years Care Facility stood before her like a beacon of hope, its warm brick exterior and carefully maintained gardens suggesting the kind of place where she could make a real difference. Maria had specifically requested to work in the memory care unit, knowing that patients with dementia and Alzheimer's needed the most patience and compassion. She'd been assigned to care for a woman in room 207, an 84-year-old patient who'd been admitted 3 months ago with severe memory loss and confusion. The morning supervisor, Janet, met Maria at the front desk with a clipboard and a tired but genuine smile. Janet had been working at Golden Years for 15 years, and her weathered hands spoke of countless hours spent caring for others. She looked at Maria with the kind of maternal concern that made new employees feel both welcomed and slightly nervous. "You sure you're ready for this, honey?" Janet asked, her voice carrying the weight of experience. "Room 207 can be challenging. The patient doesn't remember much, gets confused easily, and sometimes becomes agitated when she can't recognize where she is or who's helping her." Maria nodded confidently, though her stomach fluttered with first-day nerves. She'd trained for this, studied for this, dreamed of this moment when she could finally put her skills to use, helping people who needed her most. The textbooks had prepared her for confused patients, for the heartbreak of watching minds slowly fade, for the small victories that made every difficult day worthwhile. "I'm ready," Maria said, meaning every word. "I want to help her feel safe and comfortable." Janet handed her the patient file, but kept the folder closed as they walked down the carpeted hallway toward the memory care wing. The walls were painted in soft, calming colors, with handrails running along both sides and family photos displayed in protective frames. The smell of coffee mixed with the faint scent of disinfectant and something else Maria couldn't quite identify, something that reminded her of her childhood but couldn't place. "Her name is Elena Vasquez," Janet explained as they approached room 207. "She was brought in by social services after neighbors found her wandering the streets, confused and unable to remember her address. No family has come forward to claim her. It's sad, really. She keeps asking for her granddaughter, someone named Maria, but we haven't been able to locate any relatives." Maria's steps slowed slightly. Elena Vasquez. The name felt familiar, like an echo from a dream she couldn't quite remember. Her own grandmother had been named Elena, but that was just a coincidence. Elena was a common name in their community. Her grandmother had died when Maria was 12, or at least that's what her mother had told her after one of their many moves to different cities, different states, different lives. They stopped outside room 207, and Janet placed her hand gently on Maria's shoulder. The gesture was meant to be reassuring, but something in Janet's expression seemed hesitant, as if she was holding back information that might be important. "Before we go in," Janet said quietly, "I should mention that she sometimes talks about her past, about a granddaughter she raised for several years. The stories are probably confused memories, but she gets very emotional when she talks about this girl. She says she lost touch with her when the family moved away suddenly." Maria's hand froze on the door handle. Her mouth went dry as fragments of memory began to surface like pieces of a puzzle she'd tried to forget. She remembered living with her grandmother for 3 years when her mother had struggled with addiction and depression. She remembered Elena's small apartment with its yellow kitchen walls and the smell of fresh tortillas every morning. She remembered the stories Elena would tell her about their family's history, about strength and resilience passed down through generations of women who'd survived impossible circumstances. But her mother had told her that Elena died when Maria was 12. They'd moved across the country shortly after, and Maria had never been allowed to attend a funeral or visit a grave. Her mother had said it was too painful, that they needed a fresh start somewhere new. "What does she look like?" Maria asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Janet studied Maria's face with growing concern. "Honey, are you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." "Please," Maria said, her hand trembling slightly on the door handle. "Can you describe her?" "Well, she's small, maybe 5 feet tall, gray hair that she likes to braid, brown eyes. She has a small scar on her left hand from what looks like an old burn, and she always asks the kitchen staff if they need help making tortillas." Janet paused, watching Maria's reaction carefully. "She also has this habit of humming while she folds laundry. Old Mexican lullabies, mostly." The world seemed to tilt around Maria as each detail hit her like a physical blow. The scar from the kitchen accident when Elena had grabbed a hot pan to save a burning meal. The lullabies she'd sung every night when Maria couldn't sleep. The way she'd taught Maria to fold fitted sheets into perfect squares, humming the same tune their great-grandmother had hummed decades ago. "I need to see her," Maria whispered, though part of her wanted to run away, to preserve the safe story she'd believed for 14 years. Janet opened the door slowly, and Maria followed her into the bright, cheerfully decorated room. Sunlight streamed through windows that looked out onto the facility's garden, where residents often sat in the afternoons, watching birds and squirrels play among the flowers. The room smelled like lavender and something else, something that made Maria's chest tighten with recognition. An elderly woman sat in a chair by the window, her gray hair neatly braided and her small hands folded in her lap. She wore a soft pink sweater that looked hand-knitted, and her brown eyes held the distant look that Maria had learned to recognize in dementia patients. But even with the confusion of illness, even with the weight of years and struggle, the woman's face was unmistakably familiar. It was Elena. It was her grandmother, alive. Maria's legs nearly gave out as the full weight of realization crashed over her. Elena looked up as they entered, and for a moment her confused expression cleared. Her eyes focused on Maria's face with an intensity that seemed to pierce through the fog of memory loss. "Maria," Elena whispered, her voice trembling with hope and disbelief. "Mija, is that really you?" The sound of her grandmother's voice saying her name broke something inside Maria's chest. She'd spent 14 years believing Elena was dead, 14 years carrying guilt about not being able to say goodbye, 14 years wondering why her mother had moved them away so suddenly and completely. Now Elena was here, alive but lost, asking for the granddaughter who'd been told she was gone forever. "Abuela," Maria breathed, the Spanish word falling from her lips like a prayer she'd forgotten how to say. Elena struggled to stand, her movements slow and uncertain, but her eyes never left Maria's face. "I knew you'd come back," she said, tears beginning to flow down her weathered cheeks. "I told everyone you'd come back for me. I waited for you, Mija. I waited so long." Janet stepped back toward the door, recognizing that she was witnessing something far beyond a routine introduction between caregiver and patient. Her experienced eyes took in the physical resemblance between the two women, the way they moved toward each other with the gravitational pull of family, the way years of separation seemed to collapse in an instant. Maria moved forward on shaking legs, her professional training warring with the overwhelming need to embrace the woman who'd raised her, who'd taught her to be strong, who'd loved her unconditionally during the most difficult years of her childhood. She knelt beside Elena's chair, bringing herself to eye level with the grandmother she'd mourned for half her life. "I'm here, Abuela," Maria said, her voice thick with tears she'd held back for 14 years. "I'm here now." Elena's hands reached out to touch Maria's face, her fingers tracing the features that had changed from child to woman, but still carried the unmistakable stamp of family resemblance. "You're so beautiful, Mija. So grown up. I missed you every single day." The simple words shattered Maria's composure completely. She'd spent years wondering if Elena had forgotten her, if their time together had been as meaningful to her grandmother as it had been to her. Now she knew that Elena had carried the loss just as deeply, had waited and hoped for a reunion that seemed impossible until this moment. "I thought you were dead," Maria sobbed, taking Elena's hands in her own. "Mama told me you died. We moved away, and she said we couldn't go to your funeral because it would be too sad. I believed her for 14 years. Elena's expression shifted from joy to confusion to a deep, abiding sadness. "I never died, mija. I looked for you everywhere. I called the police. I hired someone to help me search. Your mother, she took you away in the middle of the night. She wouldn't tell me where you were going." The pieces of Maria's fractured childhood began to rearrange themselves into a different picture entirely. Her mother's sudden decision to move across the country. The way she'd become defensive whenever Maria asked about Elena. The careful way she'd constructed a story about Elena's death that couldn't be questioned or investigated. "She was using drugs again," Elena continued, her voice gaining strength as the memories became clearer. "I tried to help her, but she was angry. She said I was trying to steal you away from her. One night she came to get you while I was sleeping. When I woke up, you were both gone." Maria felt a rage building in her chest that she'd never experienced before. Her mother had stolen 14 years from both of them, had let Elena live with the heartbreak of losing her granddaughter, while Maria grew up believing she was alone in the world. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. But looking at Elena's face now, seeing the joy and relief that overshadowed even the pain of separation, Maria realized that anger could wait. This moment was about healing, about connection, about the miraculous fact that they'd found each other again in the most unexpected way possible. "How did you end up here?" Maria asked gently. Elena's expression clouded with confusion again, the way it did when her memory struggled to organize recent events. "I don't remember everything clearly. I was living alone in the same apartment, waiting for you to come back. But I started forgetting things, important things. I'd go to the store and forget how to get home. I'd call the police thinking someone had stolen my furniture, but it was just in different rooms than I remembered." Janet stepped forward quietly. The neighbors found her wandering 3 blocks from her apartment at 2 a.m, wearing only a nightgown. She couldn't remember her address or how to get home. Social services brought her here when they couldn't locate any family members. "Because I was looking for Maria Rodriguez," Elena said, her voice gaining clarity. "But your mother changed your name when you moved away. She changed both your names. I was looking for the wrong people." Maria's world shifted again as she realized the full scope of her mother's deception. Not only had she lied about Elena's death, she'd made it impossible for Elena to find them, even if she'd tried. The systematic way her mother had erased their connection spoke to a level of manipulation that Maria was only beginning to understand. "What's your real last name, mija?" Elena asked. "Rodriguez," Maria said, "but it used to be Vasquez. Mama changed it when I was 13. She said it would be easier for us to start over with a new name." Elena nodded sadly. "I spent years looking for Maria Vasquez and Elena's granddaughter. But you became Maria Rodriguez, and I became just another old woman with no family." The tragedy of near misses and deliberate obstacles hung heavy in the air between them. They'd been in the same city for the past 5 years, Elena in assisted living and Maria finishing her CNA training. They'd shopped at the same grocery stores, walked past each other on the same streets, lived parallel lives that never intersected because of one woman's decision to cut them apart. Maria stood up and moved to the window, trying to process the magnitude of what had just happened. She'd come to work expecting to care for a stranger, to begin building the professional relationships that would define her career. Instead, she'd walked into a reunion she'd never dared to hope for, a chance to reclaim the most important relationship of her childhood. "I can't be your official caregiver," Maria said, turning back to Elena with tears still streaming down her face. "There are rules about family members providing professional care, but I can visit you every day. I can make sure you're getting everything you need. I can be here." Elena's face lit up with a smile that seemed to chase away years of sadness and confusion. "You don't have to take care of me, Mija. Just don't disappear again. That's all I need." But Maria was already making plans, her mind racing through possibilities and solutions. She could transfer to a different unit and visit Elena during her breaks. She could work with the social workers to establish legal guardianship to make sure Elena received the best possible care. She could spend her days off bringing Elena the foods she loved, the music she remembered, the family photos that might help anchor her memories. "I'm never leaving you again, Abuela," Maria promised, kneeling beside Elena's chair once more. "Never." Elena reached into the drawer of her bedside table and pulled out a small, worn photograph. It showed a young Maria, maybe 10 years old, grinning gap-toothed at the camera while Elena braided her hair. Maria remembered the day it was taken, a random Tuesday when Elena had decided they needed to document their time together. "I kept this with me always," Elena said, pressing the photograph into Maria's hands. "Even when I couldn't remember what I had for breakfast or what year it was, I remembered this little girl who made me laugh every day." Maria stared at the photograph through her tears, seeing not just a memory but a promise fulfilled. The little girl in the picture had grown up to become exactly the kind of person Elena had hoped she'd be. Strong, compassionate, dedicated to caring for others. Elena had shaped those qualities during their years together, had given Maria the foundation she'd built her entire adult life upon. "You made me who I am," Maria whispered. "Everything good about me came from you." Elena patted Maria's cheek with the same gentle touch she'd used to comfort her as a child. "And now, you're here to take care of other people's grandmothers. You're doing exactly what you were meant to do, Mija." The irony wasn't lost on either of them. Maria had chosen a career in elderly care because of her love for Elena, because of the lessons about dignity and compassion she'd learned during their time together. She'd spent years caring for other people's grandmothers while her own grandmother lived alone, forgotten by a system that couldn't find her family. Janet cleared her throat softly from the doorway. "I'll need to speak with the administrator about this situation. There are protocols we need to follow when family members are discovered. But for now, why don't you two spend some time together? I'll make sure you're not disturbed." As Janet left, closing the door gently behind her, Maria and Elena sat together in the sunny room, holding hands and trying to bridge 14 years of separation with words and touches, and the simple miracle of being in each other's presence again. "Tell me about your life," Elena said. "Tell me about the woman you became." Maria spent the next hour sharing stories about her education, her struggles, her dreams, and her determination to build a career helping people. She told Elena about the nights she'd studied by lamplight in tiny apartments, about the jobs she'd worked to pay for her CNA training, about the patients she'd cared for during her clinical rotations who'd reminded her of the grandmother she thought she'd lost. Elena listened with the focused attention that cut through her memory problems, her eyes bright with pride and love. Occasionally she'd nod or ask a question that showed she understood not just the words, but the heart behind them. "Your mother," Elena said finally, when Maria's stories brought them to the present moment. "Do you still talk to her?" Maria's expression hardened slightly. "She died 2 years ago. Drug overdose. I was with her at the end, and she never told me you were alive. Even when she was dying, she kept the secret." Elena was quiet for a long moment, processing this information with the careful way she approached all new facts in her current condition. "She was sick, Mija. Addiction made her do terrible things, but she loved you in her own way." "She stole 14 years from us," Maria said, her voice tight with anger she couldn't entirely suppress. "Yes," Elena agreed simply. "She did, but we have now. We have today and tomorrow and as many days as God gives us. Don't let anger about the past steal the joy from right now." It was exactly the kind of wisdom Elena had shared when Maria was young, the gentle way she'd taught her to focus on what could be changed rather than what couldn't be undone. Maria felt herself relaxing, letting go of the rage that served no purpose now that they were together again. They spent the afternoon talking and holding hands and sharing the kind of comfortable silence that only comes between people who truly know each other. Elena showed Maria the few possessions she'd brought to the facility, including a rosary that had belonged to her mother and a recipe book written in Spanish that contained generations of family cooking wisdom. "I want to teach you to make your great-grandmother's tamales," Elena said, flipping through the worn pages. "The recipe is in here, but I need to show you the technique. My hands still remember, even when my mind forgets other things." Maria nodded eagerly, already imagining weekend cooking sessions and the joy of learning family traditions she'd thought were lost forever. She could bring ingredients, they could use the facility's kitchen, and Elena could pass down the knowledge that connected them to generations of strong women who'd come before them. As the day wore on and visiting hours approached their end, Maria realized that her entire life had just changed course in the most beautiful way possible. She'd woken up that morning as a new CNA, starting her first job, and she was leaving as a granddaughter who'd been given the most precious gift imaginable. "I have to go home now," Maria said as the sun began to set outside Elena's window. "But I'll be back tomorrow, and the day after that, and every day after that." Elena squeezed her hand tightly. "I know you will, mija. You always keep your promises." Maria kissed her grandmother's forehead, breathing in the familiar scent that had haunted her dreams for 14 years. "I love you, abuela. I never stopped loving you." "I love you too, my beautiful granddaughter. Now go home and rest. Tomorrow we'll start making up for lost time." As Maria walked through the halls of Golden Years Care Facility, she felt like she was floating. The other staff members she passed seemed to sense that something extraordinary had happened, but she wasn't ready to share the story yet. She needed time to process the miracle, to understand how the universe had conspired to bring them back together in exactly the right way. She'd applied for a job caring for elderly patients because she wanted to honor Elena's memory. Instead, she'd been led directly to Elena herself, alive and waiting for the granddaughter who'd never stopped looking for a way home. Outside in the parking lot, Maria sat in her car for several minutes, staring back at the building that now held everything she'd thought she'd lost. Tomorrow she'd begin the process of changing her work assignment, of establishing her legal relationship to Elena, of building the life they should have shared all along. But tonight, she just wanted to hold on to the joy of knowing that love really could survive anything, that family bonds were stronger than deception and time and all the forces that tried to tear people apart. She'd spent 14 years believing she was alone in the world. Now she knew that she'd never been alone at all. Elena had been waiting, holding on to hope and love and the unshakable belief that her granddaughter would find her way home. Have you ever experienced a moment that changed everything you thought you knew about your life? Share this story with someone who believes in the power of love to overcome any obstacle.